Listen, so I'm super excited to start today, guys. Some background. I'm Layla. If you're here for me, you might follow me. I talk about college. I'm going to talk about college today. I usually talk about careers. I'm really passionate about the topic today for two reasons. One, I completely hacked my way into MIT, and it's so replicable, and I think that anybody could do it if you have the right strategy. And I did it because my big brother, who's Hamada's friend, called me before I applied and literally gave me the strategy we're going to talk about today. The second reason is my mom runs an Islamic school. Hamada, who's here, literally volunteers every year to help the seniors there understand college apps. And in some way, it's me paying it back to Hamada and being like, you're so there for my community, so I'm going to be there for you. So Hamada, who are you? Give us in like a nutshell. Who are you and why are you here and why are you good at this?
First and foremost, thank you, Layla. I hope you guys can hear me loud and clear. I got a little mic, so hopefully you guys can hear it. Yeah. So again, first and foremost, thank you, Layla, for hosting me on this live. My name is Hamada. I am the founder and CEO of Write Track Admissions, a global admissions consulting company that's been around since 2008, so almost 20 years. And as Layla said, I've had the fortune of being able to volunteer for Layla's mother's school through the years and trying to guide students there. But we work with clients and students pretty much everywhere around the world, especially in the United States, focused on college applications and graduate applications as well. And part of it, Layla, I think what makes this very meaningful is that even though you are focused on the professional side and the career-oriented side, it's a journey. And it's a journey that doesn't just start in a vacuum the day you graduate from college or the day you graduate from graduate school. It starts far into middle school, high school, college, what you're doing in college, graduate school, what you choose to do, right? Because you've pivoted quite a few times until you landed where you are, and the graduate school that you selected. And then thereafter, what are you doing in terms of the path that you're taking? So hopefully
we're going to start there. I think this is super crucial because I think this is actually, it being a journey is exactly how the job application process works too. People always try to represent themselves. And so Hamada, first of all, I would love for the format of this kind of talk to be like 4 tactical steps, but let's get into it by doing the overarching theory above it all. When people apply to jobs, what they often do is they'll put every experience. I babysat, I worked here, I consulted here, I interned there. And it's a bunch of disparate experiences. People don't want experiences. They want outcomes. So you have to shape your narrative as an outcome. So let's pretend like you're consulting me, a little grown mom of 3 applying to college. And I want you to break down in 4 steps, 4 tactical steps. How does one go about shaping the journey, going about the application process? It's application season now. Break it down for me in 4 steps, Hamada. Okay. Maybe 5. I don't care how many steps. But be like linear.
All right. So let's just say, first of all, if you're a mother of 3 and you're applying to college, that's a story in and of itself. But let's just say you're starting in high school and you're thinking about what is the linear journey. And I say linear because obviously it's easy for us to understand almost chronologically and linearly how you would go about doing this. But suffice it to say, the first thing you want to do is start really thinking through what it is that really drives you, what really ignites you, what excites you. We use the term passion. I want to almost use the term obsession if you have an obsession, but let's just use passion because it's easier to think through. Okay. And you start to think about that. And if you're like, Hamada, I don't know what my passions are, let me tell you. What gets you so excited by doing something that everything else around you almost blurs out? You lose track of time. Use that as a litmus test. You lose track of time because you're so obsessed about doing this one thing or doing several things, right? And that's your passion. Now, if you said, okay, I think I've zeroed in on a specific passion, whatever it may be, then the next step is, okay, then let's reverse engineer what we can do more of that shows, to Layla's point, let me not denigrate the concept of experience, because experience should lead to outcomes. Because some people will jump and want outcomes without even getting the basic experience, because it's a bit of a double-edged sword. You have to have experiences, some which are going to be good, some which are going to be bad. And the reason you want to have bad with the good experiences is because you also learn from the bad experiences, from the failures. But through those experiences, because you've now reversed engineered and figured out, I have this passion, to do more of this passion, I need these experiences. When you're doing the experiences, step 3 is, how do we establish the artifacts, the evidence of that by having the outcomes? So you have these outcomes that start coming about from these passions because you want the experience to result in something. That thing that it results in, step 4, is then grab those things, those outcomes, and memorialize it. Encapsulate it in a piece of evidence, an artifact. That artifact is what you're going to use to substantiate the outcome, which substantiates the experience, that substantiates the passion. And that's what you're going to be using in your application materials, because to Layla's point, they don't care that you may have gone to a specific high school. Frankly, they don't care if you've just taken one AP. They want to know what you've done with it. That is being future ready. That is what you're thinking about, is what can I do that has an impact and an outcome, and what evidence have I established? Because there's so much disinformation. There's so much people that are lying about their applications. They want to see people who are doing, and there's an outcome coming from it.
So I'm going to give you 2 examples of places that I've done that and seen that happen so that people can contextualize it. My sister-in-law, for example, somebody wanted us to repeat the 5 steps. The step 1 was figure out what ignites you. Step 2 is what are artifacts that prove what ignites you is really doing the thing. Step 3 is memorialize them with experiences and turn them into a story. And was that right, Hamada? Did I miss anything?
You actually jumped one extra step. Let me quickly align it. So figure out what ignites you, step 1. Okay. Step 2, figure out what experiences allows you to do what ignites you. Let's get more of those experiences going. And we can delve a little deeper in terms of what is an experience. Step 3 is figure out what outcomes, what impact can come from that experience. Step 4 is now let's make sure that we've memorialized it. We've documented it. We've established the evidence. Step 5, you already just mentioned, which is now let's use those artifacts to then develop the story.
Got it. Okay, perfect. So those are the 5 steps. I'm going to tell you 2 examples where I've seen it done. My sister-in-law she's a doctor now. When she was applying to medical school, her background, she was a bio major, but she did a ton of teaching in like Morocco, not teaching medicine, teaching English, right? Yeah. But she also happened to teach in low-income communities. And the way that she wrote ultimately her statement was, what ignites me is teaching, education, and access to education. She showed that. My experiences, I was in Morocco teaching English. Yeah. And I learned like ultimately teaching is a social emotional thing rather than an informational thing. What outcomes in Morocco, and I was able to do this thing. And I went to these clinics locally that are underserviced, and I was able to teach this thing and memorialize. I want to do this for the broader healthcare system as a physician, because I think that there are better outcomes with physicians when they know how to explain through socio-emotional ways to somebody the concepts or the things that are happening to their body to get better health outcomes. So like somebody who was less prudent might have seen that and been like, I'm a teacher, how the heck do I get into med school? She turned it into a story arc. Hamada, how would you respond to that?
Yeah, and I think what you did is the memorializing. I know this sounds bizarre, but when you said, who is this? It's your
sister-in-law.
Sister-in-law. When she went to Morocco and did this, they actually want evidence. So they want to see something that shows that she was able to do that. I really need an artifact, video evidence. And you may be like, why is that so important? It's because they want to see, they don't want you to just speak about it. They want to see it out there. Just use Layla as an example. She's a thought leader in this space. Would she be a thought leader if she didn't have this channel? She didn't have all these mechanisms of getting the word out. Those are artifacts. And she's established a litany of artifacts. In fact, she's taking her artifacts and putting it back to you guys through a lot of her stuff in a way that's just easy to understand and utilize. Nobody's going to sit there and question her credibility. The last step is what you said, is she took that artifact, took that outcome, took that experience, took that passion, and then drew it back to create the connection with med school through socioeconomic development and social development.
So I actually have my own example for my own grad school. So my MIT stories, I did not have the GPA to get into MIT. Let's be real. I really didn't. I had a bunch of public schools for my college background. I was extremely creative, but my GPA was fine. It wasn't amazing.
Yeah, and later, don't forget, before you went, if I remember, you went to NASA. Weren't you working at
Yeah, I was an intern at NASA. Actually, both these stories are the same, where I asked for jobs that I had no business being in, but that's another story. So I literally was at MIT on Saturday, and I went to the same place that I literally sobbed my eyes out because I thought I blew it. Because what happened was, I emailed the program directors for the program I wanted to get into. I said, I'm going to be in Boston. I would love to meet you. Had no plans to be in Boston. They said, sure. Got on a $15 Chinatown bus, went to Boston, walked into the guy's office with my portfolio. And this is what I did. What ignites me? I said, experience ignites me. I know that whether you're working on space, or my ultimate goal was to build post-development, or with communities post-war, usability is the single most indicator of success. Whether or not somebody uses something will ultimately, when it comes to tools or built environment, will lead to certain outcomes. And I said, here's my experience in the past. I worked for NASA building literally robots for kids to learn. I worked actually in Brazil in the slums, and I helped do some research on low income housing and how people use their housing and turn it into business. And the way that I memorialized that was actually through a paper that I wrote for the World Bank, I think at the time.
Exactly.
And I said, I should get into this program. And the guy looked at me and said, you're crazy. No, absolutely not. You have no business being here. Absolutely not. And I showed him my portfolio, which, shows all of my work. And then I left his office and I started sobbing. And then I went home and I wrote my handwritten letter. And I said, this is why you're wrong. he ended up accepting me into the program, and he said, I wanted to make sure you really knew what you wanted. So he pushed my story. He didn't push my experience. He pushed my stories and my artifacts to make sure that what I was telling him I wanted to do was actually truthful. And one more thing, and so I tell you this, I would not have gotten in if I just sent an application and left it at that.
Yeah.
I had to get in front of him and literally walk through these 5 steps and explain to him why I was the best candidate ever. And I actually went to a talk at the school on Monday to see him and just saw him. And he just gets such a kick out of me whenever he sees me, because I did the thing, right? Like, I ended up being a great student representing the program and really, truly being a good choice, if you were to ask me.
Yeah, you know, it's a beautiful story, Layla, and I think I want to say we're jumping the gun, because you didn't jump the gun. What we're doing is you've set out the 5 steps, but then you've added an X factor. Because what you did is you took all of that and you didn't just depend on the Hail Mary that it's going to work. And it's probably 99% of people are going to do submitting the application. And the reality, most people will. But you prioritize MIT. So you said, look, I don't know if you did, but other people will apply, let's say, to 10 programs. And they're going to have 1 or 2 that is their be all end all. And that one is the one that you over-indexed on, and you went all out. You took that Chinatown bus, you got to the guy's office, you Hail Married it, you laid out the portfolio, you put your heart on the table. The guy says it's a no-go. You're like, okay. You walked out and you said, SubhanAllah, I'm going to do one more thing. I'm going to send one more letter. I'm going to try one more time. And I know when I submit this, I know I'm going to have 0 regrets after this if I get denied.
Yeah.
That's a great story. And you went the distance. The closest I can tell you is when I applied to Berkeley for law school, very similar to you. I wouldn't say I didn't have the grades. I had the grades. I didn't have the standardized score whatsoever. I'm not saying I didn't have a business. I never felt an inferiority complex. Some people feel like, what is it called? The imposter syndrome. I never had that. I'm like, you know what? I deserve to be in the schools. I worked so hard in undergrad. But my SAT, my LSAT score was so poor. I was like low 150s. And I was like, you know what? I deserve to be here. I had a 3.9 GPA from UCLA. I want to apply. And I submitted to 17 law schools. But with some of them, I even got students who were current students at the program to write me separate letters of recommendation. I met the dean of admissions at one of those law school fairs, discussed what I wanted to do, put my application out there, sat back, and subhanAllah, out of 17 law schools, I got into one, which was UCLA.
That's wild. So
and that's, to your point, Layla, also, people like you and I have to say this, we pay it forward, because we didn't just sit back and say we're going to be average students. I didn't do particularly well at Berkeley in terms of as a student, but I started a journal, I mentored students, and eventually I started Write Track based out of the experience because I want to pay it forward, much like you're doing right now.
Yeah. First of all, I love that. And I really want to quickly take a step back, because I'm reading a book right now and it talks about embarrassment and guilt and shame. Let me turn my light back on. And so the author talks about how, like, what you went through was embarrassment. What I went through was embarrassment. I think embarrassment is a phenomenal tool, because there's really 4 negative feelings that we might confuse with embarrassment. The first is shame. I'm a bad person. I've done something bad. The second is guilt. I'm a good person. I've done something bad. The third is humiliation. I'm a good person. Somebody embarrassed me. I didn't deserve it. The fourth is embarrassment. I put myself out there and it really sucked, but it's going to be over soon. And like the fourth, in my opinion, is what he calls the X factor, is maybe a nicer way to put it, but it's really figuring out, I know what they want. I'm going to throw the Hail Mary. I'm going to do the thing. And you know what? Most people won't do it because it's
so uncomfortable. The stories are endless. There was a story I read about a dude that wanted to get a job. He was submitting his resume. He realized it's not going to work out. So what did he say? He said something about, he sent donuts to all the employers that he applied to. And he said, there's a higher chance that you'll eat this donut than read my resume, or something like that. And, and everybody's, what the hell's going on? We read his resume and he got the jobs that he wanted. You do those things, you think out of the box to really make yourself stand out, but obviously in a way that doesn't become too over the top, because that also can have a negative impact. But I think it's a very important factor, is like, you've got to be resourceful. You've got to be adaptable. These are key qualities that will allow you to stand out. I keep using the term future ready, but these are things that will make you future ready. Is how are you adaptable? How will you go the distance? How will you be resourceful? You can type this into a chat and say, how can I stand out as an individual? And they will give the same crap to everybody else. You've got to think as a human being. You've got to think about what people are thinking about and get in front of them. Layla, you probably have too many stories. You've raised so much money for your business. That doesn't happen by hapstance. You guys put yourself out there. You took that embarrassing pill. You sat in front of them. You said, what's the worst that could happen? We're qualified. We just need the FaceTime. And you do it.
Yep. Okay, love this. Really quickly, I'm going to run through, for anybody who's new, the 5 steps. And then, Hamada, I want you to talk to me about grad school versus undergrad, because I think there's a mix of both. Guys, feel free to use the chat And I would not only say if you're applying to grad or undergrad, but I would also push us. What are you applying to? What are tips that you're looking for? So the first is figure out what ignites you. The second is what is experience you can get that shows what ignites you. The third is what is the outcomes that come out from what ignites you in that experience. The fourth is how do you memorialize those outcomes? So to say, these are the impacts of me doing these things. And then the fifth is the artifacts that come out of memorializing it. And the sixth is the bonus, which is the X factor. So the Hail Mary you throw.
The fifth is piecing it together into a story, the narrative, which is what you're going to be using as your main application to the schools.
Yeah.
And then, and the sixth, if there's a step, and I would call it a 5B. If there's a 5A, which is your story, a 5B would be just what's your Hail Mary, what's your X factor, what's your je ne sais quoi that's going to help you stand out. And also, let me clarify one other point. When I say experience, that taps into your obsession, it is that. What is the experience that allows you to tap that obsession? Yep. Don't just tell me, here are a series of experiences. You've told me your obsession. You've told me your passion. What does it do? I'll give you a small example. This is wild, guys, wild. And it's also a shameless plug. I'm trying to be one of the few people out there, probably there's about 1,000 of us, that have been to every country in the world. I love traveling. My motto, I should have my hat, I literally wear it all the time, says stay curious. My obsession is curiosity, if that's an obsession. My obsession is to keep investigating and learning about the human experience in different parts of the world through historical application, what have you. I am manifesting that. SubhanAllah, I'm super fortunate for it. A lot of people make fun of me about it, including your brothers, Aleda. It's just trying to travel like a madman. And I'm down to the last 28 countries. Over the last 25 years, I've been traveling to all of them. So my obsession is curiosity and learning about other people's experiences. I'm tapping into that obsession through obsessive travel. The travel is allowing me to, the impact I'm having, I hope, is I'm creating a YouTube channel that allows people to think through education, exploration, entertainment, so that they can understand that the other is not so different from us, but there's so much we can learn from them. And that's the outcome, is that I'm creating these videos, and the outcome really is the YouTube videos. And then the stories, what I'm telling you guys right now. I'm not applying to any school, but it's part of my narrative. It's part of celebrating the fact that we can go out there and do something radical that really taps into our obsession, that allows us to have an impact into other people's lives.
I'm going to push this a step further and say you could use that story for applying to anything.
Okay.
You could use it for applying to med school, for example, by talking about how this makes you extraordinarily empathetic to other cultures and doesn't discount how other cultures think about things. You can use it for law school to talk about how you've maybe seen discrepancies in terms of access. All you need is the story arc. Guys, my best kept secret is on any panel, I have 5 stories. I don't care what questions they ask me, I'll answer with one of those 5 stories. And that is usually my preparation.
Always.
If you have your story arc, you can answer almost anything with that story arc. So Hamada, grad school versus school, undergrad, is the difference really that big?
Okay, I want to just put what do they say? I want to put a pin. I want to put a pin in something after we do this question for you. I want to put a pin, which is guys, I want to show you what the story arc looks like through a very simple, because Leila and I, we think the same. We're all about steps, but we're also about mnemonics and ways of remembering it. So I'm going to go back to it. Remind me to talk about the ABCDEF of the personal statement, which is literally something that I love and I've shared with hundreds of clients around the world.
Why don't we do that first? I feel like that's more important. Let's do that first.
Okay, so
this is what people pay big bucks to figure out. So listen up.
Okay, Leila, do me a favor. You've got the paper and pen. I don't have one in front of me. Draw me a story arc. So you got a story arc. Start at the bottom left with A, then halfway up the arc B, and then closer to the top C. At the top D. Lower back on the same line with C, put E, and then at the bottom put F.
Okay, guys, I'm going to show you this masterpiece. I got 2 architecture degrees. No?
Sounds great. That's good enough for me. Okay, guys. A, attention grabber. Okay, what are you going to say for your story arc that's going to pull in the audience? What is the way you're capturing it? Guys, I want you to think about it like a Hollywood movie. The movie's going on, audience is chomping on the popcorn, and the first scene comes up. You got to grab them. If you don't grab them, you bore them from the beginning, they're out. You only have 5 to 10 minutes for a personal statement to be read by a college or graduate school.
Wow.
So what's the attention grabber? How you're going to pull them in, think about your story. And what you usually pull them in with, I'm going to say this, I'm going to try to go this quickly. I usually have a whole webinar on just this part, is you're going to start either with a fact that is outrageous, that grabs their attention, a quote, a piece of dialogue that you're having with someone, right? an action sequence. You grab them in, but don't just throw it out there, and then provide a little bit of context of where this story is going to go. B, background. That's the story development. That's a character development. If Leila's going into a battlefield and this is the 5th minute of the movie and she's shot and it's a wrap, you guys never fell in love with Leila enough to feel a sense of empathy for her loss. But if Leila walks into that battle in minute 35 of the movie, after she's had 35 minutes talking about her childhood, talking about her values, her core beliefs, who she is, what makes her cry, what makes her obsessed about certain things, and then she gets shot in minute 35, you are broken. You remember it. You are at a loss. You are livid that the directors took her out of the movie. Okay. So B is developing your background, having the audience, having the admissions committee fall in love with you. That then leads us to say, okay, now I know more about you, Hamada. What have you done about the values that you have that you shared with me in area B? What have you done about the person you are and what you really believe in? C is our ability to showcase authenticity, which basically says, if this is your background, your values, here's how you're living by your values. And the way that you do that is by showing and flexing what you've done in your life that adheres to the values that you have. I volunteer, I take these classes, I've undertaken these experiences. And you flex those experiences around what you're essentially going to want to study, the direction you're going to go, which then leads me to D, direction, because you're saying, look, here's what I've been doing, but I can't get to where I want to go unless there's something that there's a change to the status quo. But before I even get to that change, what is my direction? And my direction, where I want to go, is I want to pursue blah. I want to study blah. I want to change blah. Whatever it is that fits that narrative, that's D, direction. It's an inflection point. Suffice it to say, the easiest way for us, maybe our generation, Leila, maybe even older, think about Star Wars. You've got Luke Skywalker, and he's going through his life. He sees these trials and tribulations, and he's got an inflection point. Do I train to be a Jedi? Do I go back to just being a citizen, Luke Skywalker? Where do I go? He makes a decision to fight the evil empire as a Jedi. But he can't do that without changing the status quo. How does he change the status quo? Enter the guide. Who is the guide? The guide in this case is college. The guide in this case is graduate school. They're the ones who are going to change that status quo.
E.
And E stands for educational institution and learning that you're going to get from a learning lesson, the educational institution that's going to get you there. That is what's going to change the status. And how do you write that section? Clap. Community, location, academics, personal.
Wow.
Okay, and what is P? P, Leila, is the X factor. P is what you walked into that office was the P. It's what I did by talking to the dean. It's what I knew because I had friends. It's that thing that makes it personal to you, not to anyone else in your application. So you have the community of the school, the location of the school for you as MIT to be in Boston. Look at the connection you maintained with them. The community of the school, look at the founders that you work with. The academics, look at the media lab, look at the curriculum, the classes, the concentrations, the professors, the research opportunities, all of those. And then once you've really established E and how that E is going to get you to satisfy D, which fulfills what you are doing in C, which goes back to your core in B, then we bring it all the way back to F, finale. And that closes the whole loop of the story. We started with that action, bring it to a conclusion. I couldn't believe that my father said X, Y, and Z to me, which was so life-changing and blah, blah, blah. Fast forward to the end. I remember having the conversation with my father after I showed him what I've done. We had this incredible coming of Jesus moment where we came together and understood really what I wanted to do. And it's galvanized me to do what I want to do in the future. And your school is going to be the next step in that journey.
If you guys missed that, you have to listen to the recording. Put your email in the question box and I'll email it to you. But he talked about effectively how you write a story, which is something that I've always struggled with. One, with the attention grabber. 2, your background. 3, you showcase, I can't read my word.
C is the career. If you're showcasing your professional, your academic, your volunteer, your extracurriculars, whichever one is relevant, you're going to showcase that in C, career, because now you're flexing to the school. Hey guys, take me. I'm great. Why? Because look what I've done. Okay? So this is your opportunity to flex your skills, your aptitude, your capabilities.
Okay. And then D is direction. E is education or enter the guide. And F is finale. So this is amazing. This is so fantastic. Somebody actually put a question earlier, Hamada, as a parent. And I actually, guys, I realized when I was at MIT this weekend, my son, Arisa, who's 5, is closer to the age of the undergrads than I am at this point in my life. So actually, I'm going to ask the question for this parent as well. She said, hold on, let me scroll up. She said, for parents, what's your advice for channeling our children's activities and interests to meaningful and tangible result-oriented actions? The pressure is brutal. It feels like it should fit in the structure. Like, I don't know. What would you do when you had kids?
In terms of what?
So scroll up to the question real quick. It says, for parents, what's your advice for channeling our children's activities and interests into meaningful and tangible result-oriented actions? The pressure is brutal.
Yeah, the first thing that comes to mind, I want you to think about this, is in my mind, this is just a random thought, but I want you to write it down. Think mile deep, inch wide, mile deep, inch wide. Okay, guys, don't think mile wide, inch deep, mile wide, inch deep. No, deep, small breadth. Why do I say that? Because I want your interest in your kids. Initially, let's say your kid is in 8th grade or 7th grade or even 9th grade. Then you cast a wide net and let's see where your passion is. You'll see your kid light up. You'll see your kid stop procrastinating and do that task over and over. Guys, there's a great podcast out there called Founders. Founders goes through all the people that really are the luminaries in the field. Incredible. Like the person that, like Coco Chanel, all the way to Louis Vuitton, all the way to the person who ran like Ray-Ban and all of a sudden, it's crazy. And if there's something, you start to see at a young age, they were obsessed about something. It just lands. In fact, guys, sorry, I'm going to keep digressing for a second. The most watched TED Talk ever was about a guy who speaks about our education system from like 2009 or 2008, something Robinson, Sir something Robinson. And he talks about this person who became a phenomenal dancer and they thought she was autistic because she just could not focus on her studies. One day the doctor put some music on in a room, the parent is outside talking to the doctor, look in the room, and the kid starts dancing to the music. They're like, wait a second, why is she doing that? It's because they found out that music inspires her in a way that nothing else did. She became a phenomenal dancer, choreographer, musician, and so forth. So when you see that, you try a couple of different things that really can land with the kid. And when you see that thing land, that interest, or maybe 2 interests, you run with it and you hyper focus on it and you go down a mile deep into it. What do I mean by that? They become the best of class in that area. And through doing that, you start to see the impact result. You cannot see impact later. You cannot see it if you took on 15 activities over the course of high school at an inch deep. You won't make an impact.
That's so interesting because I feel like people try to fill their personal statements. By the way, I'm sorry, my phone keeps falling. My son broke my tripod 30 seconds before this call. It's like disaster. That's really interesting. And it goes back to my sister-in-law teaching in Morocco and getting into med school as a result of teaching in Morocco by showing that my interest in access to knowledge is so deep. Yeah. There's a specific question in the chat. This is more specific to applying as a major, but let's say most of my extracurriculars are journalism and community related. I do research in cancer, but I want to apply as a physics major because I love the subject and aim to become a nuclear engineer. How do you think I can make the jump? I have great physics grades and take all the advanced physics and math classes available. So this is interesting. She's saying that her extracurriculars are in journalism, her extracurriculars are community related. She's researched cancer, but she wants to be a nuclear engineer in physics. How would you consider that story arc? And I know I'm totally putting you on the spot.
Yeah, look, there's a lot of people that have these very unique interests that are corollary to their core. And what we need to find is a common thread. What is it about journalism that feeds into physics? And if there's one thing, and you put me on the spot, but let's run with this random thought, it is curiosity and investigation. Which essentially is what physics is about, is trying to reverse engineer certain thoughts or certain patterns through investigating to figure out what is some kind of solution. We know that in journalism, it's all going to be objective. It's objective versus maybe in physics, it's more objective because it's based on science. But at the end of the day, you're saying, I'm so curious that I do all these, and I'm assuming it's journalism that is reporting on certain things, that I like to investigate and get in depth. Much like how I like to do that in physics, to investigate, to get to the core of the crux of the problem, using formulas and using ideas to go out there. In journalism, it's subjective. In physics, it's objective. Both of them can come together. And trust me, if somebody's been doing physics from the jump with no other transferable skill versus the person that has these transferable skills, that has a eclectic background, but let's say they're almost the same in terms of grades, they'll go with a journalism person
100%.
any days and twice on Sunday. Why? Because in the end of the day, people do not want hyper expertise in one field. And I did say get deep with an experience, but I'm talking expertise. You want to be good at something really good, but you want to have enough, they call them neo-generalists, enough knowledge about all kinds of different fields that allow you to think multi-dimensionally to solve a problem. Classic design thinking, you bring different people together, they come at it, the engineer with the lawyer, with the doctor, with the business person, and the idea formulates. So for me, I would say if I had a superpower, and if I said I love curiosity, my superpower is I know a little bit about a lot of different things, which allows me to do exactly what we're doing, Leila, which is helping people find their narrative, because I can understand somebody's background in Burkina Faso, and I understand a little bit about quantum physics, and I know enough about the market that I can bridge those things together.
Yeah. If you have just joined, put your email in the question box. I'm screenshotting it. I'm going to send you guys a recap because this is like phenomenal. Hamada has literally unpacked how to put a story arc together, which is the hardest part of an application. People focus on filling their application when in reality it's the story arc. Okay. So I'm going to make a point, but after this question. Undergrad asking, not officially for sports, instruments, publications, niche sports, public speaking, heads of clubs to be well-rounded. And they're all kids doing that in 4. That's not a question. That's a comment. Yeah, no, you're not wrong. You're not wrong. And I think what Hamada is saying is you need to show the ability to take those skills and weave them into a story arc. Weave them into a story arc.
And let me jump in for 2 seconds. I think some people are going to be like, wait, Hamada, let's use the UC application, which has 4 personal insight essays.
Yeah.
And you can go, how the hell am I going to take a 6-step process and basically break it down for a 350-word essay that is so hyper specific about giving an example of where you have to change, you changed your belief. How am I going to do that? Here's the point. Let the story arc create the overarching story. Now let's start taking little pieces from that story and placing it into these different essays. I love the UC application because they're not lazy. Schools are lazy when they say, please tell me who you are, why you want to apply to our school, what you want to study. Come on, give me something interesting. But when you're asking me, tell me about a time you challenged an existing belief. Tell me about a risk you took. Tell me about a failure you faced. Tell me about leadership that you had. Tell me about an obsession that you may have. These are classic great stories. Take the story arc, and then you can start breaking into little pieces. And then the way I usually tackle those essays is I say issue, context, educational learning experience. Issue, context, educational learning experience. Sorry, guys, for the acronym, ICE. It is what it is. I came up with that way before ICE went bananas. But the idea here is that you've got the issue, what you're going to be talking about. You've got the context of your experience. And then you have the educational learning that you gain from it. Typically, when you do those kind of essays.
Issue, context, educational learning. I love that. You should know, Hamada, you probably know this because you've seen me in different contexts. But most people here probably don't know, like my story arc for social media is very different than my business story arc. And none of those story arcs were my personal application story arcs. So like in my business, so on social media, I come in and say, listen, 50% there was 90 business bestsellers by men named John. It's all women combined in 2020. And my first day of work, starting my own business, I was part of the 7% of minority women in the C-suite, as well as 50% of entry-level workforce that's female. And there's this huge gap in knowledge, which leads to a pipeline problem, which leads to women not getting ahead. If you're my investor, you don't know any of that. You don't care about any of that. I say, we built this product. We implemented it in a Fortune 500. We were able to scale it 300% year over year. And look, companies need it. We're able to expand it. You should probably give us more money because I promise you I can compound your investment. And you notice that there's like in the Venn diagram in my life, 1% crossover in those 2 story arcs. And so one thing I want to emphasize is a story arc has to align with the need of the person on the other side.
Know your audience. Know your audience.
You have to know your audience. It has to align with the need on the other side. Somebody says, would you say that the UCs care more about your grades and GPA or your work in community or your extracurriculars?
sadly, because of two factors. One, there are so many applicants. I think 60,000 applicants apply to UCLA. They cannot look at all the other softer factors, the align. So you have to have the grades, you have to have the SAT scores. Unfortunately, because my SAT scores when I applied, I studied in Egypt at a private international school. And when I applied to the US for college, I had trash SATs again. 3 times I took it. I eventually got into UC Santa Barbara, thank God, because I did well in the International Baccalaureate. And then I transferred to UCLA. No way in hell I would have gotten to UCLA based on my SAT score. And that was 200 years ago. Now, even more, it is sadly that. If you say, Hamada, where is it going? I'm going to tell you one more thing. This is a suspicion. Guys, quote me on this down the road. I think eventually through AI, they're going to start putting together, this is just a suspicion, they're going to start doing interviews through AI, exactly like we're doing right now. You guys see, subhanAllah, Leila and I are very similar in this way. We weren't born to be public speakers. We weren't born with our ability to articulate. We took on a lot of embarrassing episodes to get to where we are, to do what we're doing right now. It takes a lot of training and time. Guys, being a damn good communicator is going to be huge. So if you ask me, I think communication, which is the only way we're going to separate ourselves from LLMs and robots, is going to be mission critical. So I would say the most important factor today, sadly, GPA, SAT, then will come the extracurriculars matched by the story. And eventually, even that, which is going to, people are going to start using AI, and we can talk about the use of AI in college applications and so forth, is going to be overshadowed by people doing these interviews. I've done them. I don't know, Leila, if you do them, but I've done these interviews where you'll have a robot ask you a bunch of questions and you're like, bam, 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 you're hitting it out. And they're assessing, how's your eye moving? How fast are you speaking? What are you saying? The substance, everything. And it's giving a composite score to the interviewers. And eventually they're going to do that at the schools so that they can start getting people who are authentic to what they're saying.
Yep. And you know what? I will say that's for the UCs. If you think about the workforce, so I'm very corporate at this point, there's something called ATS, which is effectively what they probably use, but a UC version of that for applications. That's an immediate screen, right? So in the workforce, they say, okay, what's this person's background? How much time have they spent in the workforce? Okay, Leila, they're worth talking to. Any organization under 7,500 people probably doesn't use ATS. They probably don't have recruiters. They probably don't have HR. It's probably people sorting through it. So the workaround is you can probably make a better case in smaller schools or in private schools. Go to the lecture series. I went to the lecture series for my department at MIT on Monday because I happened to be in town. There was 20 people there. You have access to the 2 decision makers for the program. And so I would say that is probably very true for the big schools. For the small schools, do not discount how much you can hack the system based on somebody knowing you and access to the right people, because you can actually figure out who the right people are.
Yeah, and the reality is, guys, I don't think this is going to be the writing on the wall for this year, but it will be for future years. Schools are going to be in dire straits, and they're going to want students, and applications are going to become less and less. And maybe the schools are either going to cut their number of students and cut their staff, or they're just going to keep grabbing and pulling people in. I would imagine it's the former. So you'll have opportunities to really flex and showcase who you are in a way that previously, when they were just packing classes and everybody, their mother was applying because nobody else was thinking about what else they're going to do because it was college or bust, it's going to provide you with those opportunities to think out of the box. And auditing classes, going to the school, if you have the means to do it, is a great way. And it's also a good way for you to know if this is the right school for you, if you vibe with it.
Yep, there's a lot of free ones. By the way, MIT has a ton of free high school programs. I know this because during one, my computer got stolen by some punk high schooler. Anyways, who had too much access to the school. But nevertheless, there's like a lot of really cool free programs, and that's a good way to use Gen AI, figure out what their free programs are. Maybe you have to pay for housing. If you can afford to do that, do it. And another hack that's more grad school specific is try to figure out, so at least at MIT, and I know a lot of grad schools, at Harvard Business School, this is definitely the case. The professors only teach for 1 semester. The other semester they're researching. And they often need researchers. So these are either grad students or people they hire. And if you can figure out how to get a research gig, that's also a phenomenal way to prove your worth. So at the Media Lab, that was like, honestly, the pipeline, the researcher to PhD student pipeline was crazy.
100%.
People would come in as researchers and they'd apply to the PhD program. And the professor's thinking like, nah, I don't have to pay them. And they're stuck with me for 8 years and they're already contributing to my published work. So like, absolutely no brainer. Yeah.
And a small example of that for law school, for example, is we went out, when I was the editor-in-chief of a journal that we created at Berkeley, we actually went out and recruited students from the undergrad who had aspirations to go to law school. And by doing that, what we did is we got them to be involved in the journal, and they wrote about that in their applications. So there are opportunities that you wouldn't think about. You're like, wait a second, I want to go to law school. Here, there's a law school on my campus. They've got a law journal. I'm going to contribute by collecting sources and doing whatever they need, and I'm going to write about it in my application. And it's going to showcase the artifact of the fact that I'm really committed to going to law school. Small little step, but you can do that as well.
Yeah, I believe that. I believe that. Cool. Okay. So there's a lot of questions in the chat. This is a really good time to add questions as we wrap up. We'd love to hear from everybody. Hamada, before we do that, and I will put your email in the questions box if you want a follow-up with the film and everything. Hamada, how can people reach you? How do you work with people? In what capacity do you work with people? Yeah.
Sure. I'm just going to put the general company email because we're a tiny company, so you will definitely get through to us that way. A couple of things. I'm going to also put this in there because this is something that is a great resource, is the College Admissions Mastery course that I created. So you can see it right there, collegeadmissionsmasterycourse.com. That is basically 18 years of experience, more, tied together and put into one holistic book that I wrote and kept providing. There's, I think it's on the 3rd edition right now. You can find it on Amazon. You can get it from that website. That's a good way of reading up on a lot of the stuff that I'm talking about, that story arc, thinking about like how to choose the right school, how to pick the right recommenders, how to get financial aid. There's so many things in there that I've experienced because I was one of the few that graduated undergrad with no debt. I graduated from Harvard with no debt. I graduated from Berkeley with a profit. I graduated from Cambridge with no debt because I always, like Layla, figured out ways to be like, wait a second, I can go to this and I know I can find ways to pay it off. So yeah, there's a whole bunch of hacks and things like that buried in that book. And then we have, from time to time, just feel free to email us. We'll put you on an email list. We do webinars, and we'll do that throughout the course of the admission season to cover a lot of these topics. Maybe we'll get granular on recommendation letters, get granular on how to write your story, all kinds of stuff like that. But feel free to ask questions as we go.
No, that's great. The book is pinned to the bottom. It's called collegeadmissionsmasterycourse.com. And somebody asked if the way I hacked my way into MIT was by meeting somebody. Almost, but not quite. That was the last step of the process. The way I hacked my way into MIT was writing an application and a portfolio that aligned with not only my background, but the department's needs, and then making sure I saw somebody, the department head, to pitch my case to him. So it's, you have needs, I have outcomes and experience. This is what you want. I'm the right person. I'm a risk-free bet. It's very similar to hiring somebody.
And let me add, I'll add one more thing later to that is be authentic. Do not create a portfolio that is simply catered to the needs of the department that don't align with who you are and what you love to do and what you've done, but just generate crap just to be like, oh, these guys really need this one void, because they will smell a rat. So you've got to still be authentic. It just so happened that Layla had an area backed by experience, backed by artifacts, that so happened because she did the research, aligned with one of the department's needs. And there was the union. But
and I spent 2 years doing it, Hamada. It wasn't random. Like, I had my eye on it and I planned 2 years in advance.
Bam.
And so really quick side story. I'm going to write a book at some point fairly soon. Hopefully you guys will all buy it and make me a New York Times bestseller. But 2 years ago, I reached out to a book agent. This is the same strategy. It's the same strategy. 2 years ago, I reached out to a book agent. She's the Harvard of book agents. I said, hey, if I were to reach out to you in 2 years and told you I wanted to write a book, why would you represent me? I'm not looking now. I just want advice. She said, I want to see at least 25,000 emails. I want you to show that you know your distribution and you have an audience to distribute to who wants to contribute to you. I grabbed coffee with her last week and I said, I got 31,000 emails. And she's, oh, send me your proposal. So it's the same thing. I knew what I wanted. She told me what she needed. I proved it over time. And I came back to her saying, these are the outcomes you wanted. And look, the experience has been met.
Beautiful. Right? Because I remember talking to you, Layla, when you were down in the teens in terms of email lists, and you had this goal. Yeah. I'm going to be a thought leader in the space. I'm going to basically create content that people need and that I become even more of an expert from because I'm learning from people. As I teach people, they're teaching me. And I'm going to grow this authentically and organically. And I'm going to get to a point, and eventually with that email, I'm going to basically have these guys as the first buyers, or at least the evangelists of my book. You have a plan, you execute, but you have to reverse engineer. I have thoughts. My thoughts, I want to write a book. To write a book, I need to do this. What I need to get here, I need to do that. Literally. And that is, subhanAllah, that's a blessing, because a lot of people don't even know how to get to here, let alone reverse engineer to get there. Myself included. All I know is I'm like, I want to travel the world. I have this many years I want to do it in. And along that journey, I want to memorialize it and create artifacts so that people can learn and I can exchange knowledge with people. Do I know what I'm going to do with it? Zero. Do I wish I had Layla's ability and foresight? I wish. But Layla is my mentor when it comes to this stuff, so I constantly learn from her approach, and I keep learning from her approach.
Oh my gosh, please. This guy's like my big brother. Anyways, Hamada, one last question. Maybe we can squeeze one more in if everybody puts it in together. But really quickly to recap, I'm going to send an email. Put your email in the chat. Not in the chat. Put your email in the question box because I can easily screenshot it. If you want me to send you the recap, Hamada broke down like literally a formula for how to write a story arc, how to write an admissions process. And you can, this website that's pinned is his course. If you scroll up in the chat, and I'll put in the email, info@writetrackadmissions.com is how you can reach him and work with him. Somebody asked, and I think we can end on this, what are a handful of X factors that you have seen?
So one X factor, I remember this, was the person was applying to MBA programs. He had a 580 in his GMAT, but it just so happened against a random X factor. I'm just thinking about this out loud. It was during the Egyptian revolution, the revolution that was happening in Egypt. He was involved in it in some extent. He was waitlisted at some of the top business schools. We worked together with him. And he just wrote a letter or two or three to the dean of the top business school he wanted to go to, talked about his involvement in the revolution, talked about what he wants to do in terms of Egypt and its outcome, and he got accepted into Wharton. And it's like one of those complete improbabilities. No one knew how he could have gotten in with a 580 and he got into that. So that was a great example. There was an example of a guy who went in at the basic level X Factor. He just went in for the orientation and then went out of his way to meet with different deans and spoke with different people in departments and was able to audit classes. There's an X Factor where people took courses that in some way are feeders to the degree. An example of that, I have a book called The Harvard Kennedy Admissions Mastery Guide because I went to the Kennedy School. So I really focused on that. And there's a course there called the PLS, which is the Professional Leadership course. That course is a feeder into the master's program. You take that course, you're not guaranteed, but you're much faster track. You wouldn't have known that had you had not gone to school and spoke to people there. So there's courses, there's people you speak with, there's a top brass in the school that you can speak to. There is research you can do. There is audits you can take, just very basically. In fact, do yourself a favor. Figure out, this is a crazy hack. Some people use it, some people don't. Go to LinkedIn. Find the person that's doing what you want to do. Figure out what schools they attended. Figure out what they did at that school. Reach out to that person. Tell them you want to follow some of their tracks, but you don't say, basically you're not going to beg them to connect them. You're just saying, I'd love to just pick your brain. I had some questions about your journey specifically with 1, 2, and 3. And next thing you know, you do that with a couple of people on LinkedIn. Bam. Now you've got someone who's going to advocate for you, who's pretty much doing the same thing that you want to do.
That is really smart. The LinkedIn hack works, especially if you're a student. People really struggle to say no to students. So reaching out on LinkedIn, saying you want advice works. Not only are we at time, my son has found a razor, and I'm fighting for my life at this point.
A box cutter of all things.
You said no, Mama. Hamada, thank you so much. Everybody, put your emails in the chat now so I can. Mama had a Put your emails in the chat now so I can send you guys the recap and the follow-up. I highly recommend Hamada. If you didn't catch the story, the reason I have him here today is not because he paid me. It's because I've known him forever. And he shows up to my mom's Islamic school and volunteers every year to teach the kids how to get into the best college programs. And he's been doing this out of the good of his heart for years and years and years. And for the first time, I'm paying it forward. Inshallah, we do this all the time because he's truly a resource for the community. Okay, thanks, guys.
Thank you all, guys. And one other thing, I'll just leave it with this later, is I'm going to be developing a series on how to be more future ready as a student. I have a whole kind of thought process and framework around that. So look out for that. If that's something you're interested in, I'll put together a webinar and invite you if you guys have the email, because that's something I think that's extremely important. It's not just reacting to the AI world, but being part of it and figuring out the best way to stand out. Thank you all. Appreciate you. Thank you, Layla, as always.
Thanks, Hamada. Thanks, everybody, for joining. I'll take another second to
have a great weekend.
talk with emails. Bye, Hamada. See ya.
Bye.